So you're gonna get an exclusive presentation right now. And truth be told, it's like, a nice little run through, little practice run. So if you would love to drop some comments and questions down below, that would help me a lot. So without much further ado, I'm going to welcome you guys into today's presentation, the Apostolic Throne from Marib to Mecca. Wowzers. So let's get into this right now. Shouts out to Facts Over Personality as well. Salute to you, King. Alright, so let's go. Alright, so Gabriel's on as well as up in the building. What's good? So today, I'm going to go through some academic work with you guys, as I always do. That's the hope of this channel, is to actually get you guys to start thinking much more academically. And over here is basically from the book, Sean Anthony's book called Muhammed and Empires of Faith. I'm just giving you an academic overview of the methodology that academics use. I tend to use the same methodology, although I put more prioritize other sources over other sources, which we're about to, go into right now. So, over here, it says here there are four cardinal sources on which all research into the historical Muhammad hinges: the Quran, epigraphic documentary and archaeological evidences, contemporary and near contemporary non-Muslim accounts, written primarily in Armenian, Greek, Syriac, and of course Arabic literary sources that are mostly found but not exclusively preserved in the Syro-Malazi literature and the Hadith compilations. Okay? And he continues to say here, ideally, these cardinal sources must be viewed as complementary rather than mutually antagonistic layers of historical evidences. In practice, however, this ideal proves difficult to achieve. Of these four cardinal sources, it's very difficult to do that, because you know why it's difficult to do that, to harmonize stuff, which I don't ever say that you should really harmonize things. It's because a lot of the time what we find on the ground contradicts the standard dominant Islamic narrative. So where do we go from here? A lot of people try to overwrite the historical archaeological accounts with the Islamic narrative, and I'm like, why would you do that? Like me personally, I prioritize over everything else the epigraphy, the archaeological evidence. That's me. That's number one. What can we find? Then, of course, I prioritize after that the contemporary and near contemporary non-Muslim accounts. Okay, those are the two things where that's really what you're gonna find. If you really want to look into history, just go to it objectively, and then we can introduce things like the Quran, historical element and the Arabic literature resources, then we can incorporate that, but never prioritize the later sources that are written 250 to 300 years later than the archaeology that you could find that's present, that's dated. Like, why would you do that? How do you do that? So, anyways, that's my methodology. Personally, I'm sure you just in line, especially with academic methodology as well. So, a lot of you guys have been asking for what's that thing called now? For timelines, okay? Some timelines. So I actually created a nice timeline for all of you guys who are actually interested in this stuff. So, of course, starting off in the 6th century, 500 to 560, we have ample sources and evidences from archaeology of the rule of the Ethiopians, the Axumites in Arabia during the 6th century. It's all there if you want to go through it and read it. But for some strange reason, there is a complete gap from 560 AD to roughly around 640, 642 AD in terms of archaeological inscriptions. And I'll move to the third layer over here. Don't know if you can see that third layer. Let me see if I can. The third one over here. Okay, this is where we then pick up after the supposed life of the Islamic prophet. We pick up now at 640, 642. We have papyruses from Amir ibn al-Az, naming him as an Amir. We have stuff to do with Umar ibn al-Khattab, naming him as an Amir, and Uthman naming him as an Amir, etc. And we see that there's a new chronology that comes in. Okay, this chronology comes in roughly around 620 AD. But the only things that pop up is from 640. So it says it starts from 6. It says, it basically starts 20 years in to, it starts 20 years. It just, there's something predated that happened 20 years ago that we don't know what it is. But something happened 20 years ago that starts off this new calendar of the believers. And then, this is the timeline right here. The Sufyanids, the Zubairis, the Marwanids, and, things to do with the Hajj ritual and Mecca inscriptions start coming roughly in the 8th century, roughly from 697 to 702. Okay, and then obviously the Abbasids came in and ruled from 750. Now, this gap of archaeological information is usually filled with the Islamic narrative. Okay, so the Islamic narrative goes like this: Muhammed ibn Abdullah, a 7th century Arabian prophet, was born in 570 AD, commissioned to prophethood at 610, migrated to Medina in 2, and then he supposedly died in 632. Okay, that's usually what we're told. And all this over here, we cannot verify. Okay, why can we not verify even if we wanted to? Right now, there is no archaeology that goes that covers the time period from 560 AD that's dated chronologically from 560 AD to 640 AD. There's literally nothing. There's an 80-year gap, and then that 80-year gap is filled in with the Islamic narrative. Okay? Now, as I said before, personally, I don't actually, take the Islamic narrative seriously. Why do I say that? Because we understand that Islamic narrative that I just outlined to you from the birth to the, starting of, preaching by Muhammed, that 40-year period is based upon, how can I put it, a constructed chronology based upon, numerical parallels, basically. Okay, so they've created 40 years. Over here it says here, the word earlier, covered the time between the birth and invocation of Muhammad and the term Umar, which was basically means earlier, corresponded exactly to 40 years. So basically, they said that the word Umar must mean 40 years, that he was with these people. So therefore, earlier must mean 40 years. Earlier, 40 years is just basically a topos, just to say many years, basically. So many years I was with you now became a numerical value of 40. And then it shows you over here that academics have highlighted the fact that it's then split with symmetry to say that Muhammad spent 10 years in Mecca and 10 years in Medina, and this is all to show that they're all equal and balanced and so forth. So all of that time period, okay, scholars have already made it known that we can't take this as actual history, actual chronology. All of this is not actual. 570 to 610. That whole time period is not actual. 10 years later, migrated. Another 10 years later, he was in Medina, then he died. All of that stuff is just constructed chronologies, not actual history. Okay? So anyways, so let's just forget all of that stuff. Let's not talk about traditions and not traditions. How can I put it? The traditional. I don't care about the traditional Mohammedan, truth be told. I rather know about the historical Muhammad, and I'm going to introduce you guys again, reintroduce you guys to what took place in the 6th century. Okay, and over here, I'll introduce you guys again to CIH 541. Please go check it out. And it talks about Abraham being the king or the emperor of all these different regions, like the whole of Arabia. He's the emperor of the whole of Arabia. But he also puts something very interesting to say that he is basically the monarch of the Autocephalic Orthodox Church. Okay, he is the king of the Autocephalic Church, and being the king, there needs, being the monarch, there also needs to be a bishop in charge. Okay, and we see here that Abraham consecrates the church, the cathedral in Marib, and appoints and ordains the bishop in charge. And we find this in Eastern Orthodox writings, such as the Life and Works of Saint Bonaventurus, and we also find it within the side of Arabic Islamic literature that talks about the history of Abraham, and we see that he himself appointed a crowned. No, let's start off with what he really does. He first builds a throne and a cathedral for this particular office to be filled, and it is filled. Over here it says he crowns Muhammad, so he fills that throne with Muhammad, and he becomes his religious leader of this new religion that he started and he was the king over. Okay, so we find this within side of history. There's nothing, Christians, Muslims. There's nothing to argue about. This is academic information, historical information. This is what he does, right? Now, let's just proceed real quickly. Okay, we find that he needed, of course, for his Orthodox church, he needed number one, an apostle, a prophet, and a archbishop. Okay, which is filled by Muhammad, and this Muhammad, of course, was an apostle. And let's just quickly give you a breakdown of what an apostle is. In the modern usage of the term, it is applied to the leaders of Christian missions to a country, i.e. St. Patrick, the Apostle Island, St. Cyril, and Methodius, the Apostle of the Slavs. You even got, Saint Sugar. What's the Archbishop of Canterbury called again? Skip my mind. But anyway, the Archbishop of Canterbury and so forth, like, these are people that were sent on a mission as apostles to these newly found nations or these new nations, and they became apostles, they became the archbishops. Their throne remains today, and all new bishops are now appointed or enthroned upon their thrones or their cathedrals. Okay? Alright, it says here and many others, where the traditional beliefs of the operation of grace and authority in the church are maintained. It is throughout the 12 apostles that this grace and authority descend from Christ and from them to their lawfully appointed successors. Interesting. Alright. And again, I've told you before, guys, that Abraham built his cathedral, which housed the cathedra, which is the throne. And we find here, again, we're just looking at Christian definition of words. It says here, the official seat or throne, cathedral for the bishop, the seat which is earliest of the bishop's insignia normally stands in the cathedral of the diocese. Hence, the town or place where the cathedral is located is also itself known as the bishop's seat. Okay, so I'm just giving you guys a little bit of context. Okay, giving you guys a bit of context. If you can, drop me some comments in the comment section down below. And I'll just quote a little something from Tertullian. This is here, run over to the apostolic churches in which the very thrones of the apostles are still preeminent in their places, in which their own authentic writings are read, uttering the voices and representing the faces of each of them severely. Okay, I love this. I love the fact that we understand that apostles, they have thrones inside of their churches, i.e. their cathedrals. And you know what's there? Their authentic writings are still prevalent there. I love that. Because when you understand history, you understand that those writings are supposed to be in the cathedral. Certain people found the oldest Quranic writings in certain cathedrals, but somehow they don't put two and two together. Anyways, that's a story for another day. So, over here, I'm just going to introduce you guys now to contemporary sources, or near contemporary sources. How did people who first engaged with these people who spoke about Muhammad and claimed Muhammad as their prophet and apostle, what did they say about them? So you find it written in Doctrine and Jacobi that it is said that Muhammad was the keeper of the keys of heaven, or he had the key of heaven, and of course it's understood that this phraseology, the keys to the paradise, is a Christian motif that obviously evokes the conception of apostolic authority. Okay, so anytime that Christians were encountering these so-called individuals, these individuals that spoke about Muhammad, they understood him to be having apostolic authority, being an apostle. Okay? Being what? A Christian bishop, 4th century Christian, Syriac speaking setting, Afrat refers to Christian bishops as the keeper of the keys. Okay? So you have to I'm just want to get in your minds, get you guys to know and understand that this is very much so Christianity. Okay? They're being introduced to, or the early Christians that got introduced to this stuff was like, okay, fair enough, cool. Your Muhammad is supposed to have apostolic apostolic authority. He's going to be the keeper of the keys, supposed to be a bishop, right? And he also has a throne. If you, okay, over here, when Christians first met Muslims, we find here in the Maronite Chronicle where Muawiyah is spoken about, and it says here Muawiyah also did not wear a crown like other kings in the world. He established his throne in Damascus, but did not go to Muhammad's throne. Interesting in that. We find out again that Muhammad had a throne, he had apostolic authority. We find these things here. Very, very interesting. Very interesting. See, now this is where the start of the decline of original teachings of Muhammad started to take place. Why do I say that? And Kellam, why do you say that? I'll say that Muslims say exactly the same thing as me. How do you verify that, Kellam? Well, quite simply, with inside of the Islamic, Sunni Islam, you have something called the four rightly guided caliphs, okay? The Rashid, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali, okay? Those are the four. Why did it stop there? Why doesn't it continue? Why isn't everybody else rightly guided? The reason being is they stopped. If you have the four rightly guided, what does it say about the next person? It lets you know the next person is wrong and unguided. The wrongly unguided caliph. Yeah, the next person, the wrongly unguided caliph, is who? Muawiyah. What did Muawiyah do? He says, no, I'm not going to the cathedral or throne of Muhammad. I'm going to rule in Damascus. Right? And he even did sacrilege and went in against these early believers, the early faithful, and waged war on them. Yeah, supposedly marched into Medina, Mecca, Taif, that. But no, he didn't do nothing to these regions, right? But he did attack people in Najran, Hamdan, Sana'a, Marib. In South Arabia, for some reason, he attacked everybody there, killed people there, did atrocities there. Yeah? This is the first wicked man inside of Islam, so to speak. Islam, like open quote Islam, is not really Islam at this period in time, right? That this is what took place. Yeah? This took place. Sacrilege took place underneath the Umayyads. Ask your scholars, if you're Muslim, please ask your scholars what took place. And then ask yourself, why do you take from this, from these people? Now I'm starting to sound like the Shia people. Shouts out to my Shia friends out there. Haki Ali all day long. Okay, cool. So now, let me just quickly run you up to speed. So we had, Muawiyah and them, the Sufyanids coming over and taking over stuff and changing stuff that most of you guys won't even know about. So we're just gonna go past that. But we find the very first mention of Muhammad. Okay, the very first mention of Muhammad that can be dated, that we can know that is, um, archaeological. It's a numismatics. It's in a coin, right? Where we have the counter discourse taking place. The counter discourse is relating back to the people that Muhammad is the apostle of God. Muhammad is the apostle of God. This is a direct jab, technically speaking, at the Umayyads. Direct jab at them. Yeah, saying that you're not those guys. You don't have the authority. You don't have the religious continuity. You've taken over, but we're here to actually bow you and counter your caliphate claim. All right. So, anyways, it says here, I'm reading from Muhammad Empires of Faith, page 31. The confession of Muhammad's messengership conveyed on the early coins seem to have played an integral role in the Zubairis' attempt to bolster the legitimacy of Ibn al-Zubair and